Hello and welcome to the Poorhammer Podcast, episode 129. I'm your host, Brad. This is my co-host, Eric.
How's it going?
And on this episode, we're doing a long-requested topic. We're going to cover kitbashing, but Eric's not very well-versed in kitbashing, to say the least. And I had some sake with sushi, so I don't feel like doing any work today. So we're bringing on two very famous content creators, Kieran and Kieran of the Kieran Show.
How's it going, Kieran?
Hello.
Say hello, Kieran.
Hello, hello.
So Kieran is going to teach us all today in this wonderful classroom how to properly kitbash. And we're going to cover basically every angle of kitbashing, bits, fixing stuff that you screw up, anything you can really think of in between. And by the end of this, you should feel pretty confident when it comes to whipping up your own custom Space Marine or your own horrible chaos monstrosity.
Space Marines, I'm in.
But without any further ado, let's get into this.
Sounds good. All right, so as funny as that intro is about already knowing who these guys are, how about we do an actual quick introduction of who the Kierans are and why they're on for this kitbashing episode. So, Kieran, do you want to tell the audience what you've done kitbashing-wise?
I thought I was only brought on just to stop people commenting on your videos for the collab, so I thought you were just annoyed by that.
No one's ever seen those comments. I delete them every time they get posted. It's fine.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, so my experience with kitbashing is I've got the Fists of the First Templar army, which is an army I basically do like things to. It's just head swapping things and wrapping chains around them because I don't think there's a good Imperial Fists range. But other than that, I think my counterpart, Obnoxious Kieran, is probably the more important one when it comes to kitbashing.
So I created quite a gnarly looking Chaos Space Wolves army. You might have seen that on things like Instagram and any other social media platforms. It's sort of my pride and joy army. Recently, I've done a bit of like a grimdark take on Tau as well. So that was like quite a fun alternative what if style army. Absolutely love it.
And for Eric and I, our experience is going to be much more limited. That's why we brought the Kierans on.
Yeah. I mean, I've done a bit of work stuff, but really it's just been like fixing busted models as opposed to like really kitbashing. But you've done some with your Drukhari.
Yeah, so mine is like, I've done some work with my Drukhari we've shown off before on the show, mainly with my Covens portion. And there's technically the functional kitbashing of Drukhari taking all of your Caplites off the boat and making extra models out of them, which is a clever way to utilize kitbashing to your advantage there. But my Thousand Sons has a little bit as well, and that's about it for me. And I think we're both looking into doing more kitbashing with my upcoming Genestealer Cult project.
And my actual orc army that's not the just fix it and make it work.
So this should be an enlightening episode for not only the audience, but us as well. So I think, Kieran, you're going to be our main presenter to the classroom today.
How exciting. Please don't set the bar too high.
Do you want to start us off with what kitbashing is and why you would normally want to do kitbashing?
Yeah, for sure. I suppose kitbashing for me at its core is just small manipulations that could become something greater over time. When I sort of mean when I say that is, I don't know, if you imagine one of your minis that you've just purchased from Games Workshop and you just think, oh, maybe that needs a different head or a different weapon, that's a kitbash at its purest form. And it could be something small like that, or you could make some horrendous monstrosity straight from the depths of hell, piling lots of glue, lots of bits, lots of green stuff in a pile and going, this is a chaos spawn. So yeah, use your imagination.
So that does give a very broad topic there. I think maybe we can start with some of the smaller, simpler switches. So like you had said, like just swapping heads or whatever. Those types of kitbashes, what's to expect when you're actually going to try and do something like that?
Just speaking from experience, when I first started doing kitbashing, it was all about like minimal risk, and I think that's the most important thing. Ultimately, like Warhammer is quite an expensive hobby, and you have to get the most value out of it, and you don't want to ruin any of your new models. So I think when it comes to like small amounts of risk, like blue tack is your absolute best friend, and you can start by doing small head swaps or weapon swaps, adding things to vehicles that might not have been there before. It's essentially opening a box of Warhammer, looking at the rule book and going, yeah, I could probably make some small changes here and there.
Don't give me that. That is not how you approach Warhammer. You go and look at the kit and go, yes, the designer put years and years of work in this. I feel like I could cut this up and make it better.
Kieran, please. We're trying to market the show here.
To be fair, some of these sculpts that he's looking at improving are things like something not so topical, maybe the Sanguinary Guard from last week.
Oh, you mean those Sanguinary Guard that have wings on the new Codex cover, but they don't actually have wings?
They're actually my favourite Sanguinary Guard, the ones that aren't actually real.
I think they're more Princess Leia Guard. If you look at the faces on them, they look like they're asking for someone for help. It's their only hope.
I'm so glad we had the same thoughts with that picture, by the way. That was the first thing I saw was the big earmuffs the one has. I'm like, why did you build Princess Leia Sanguinary Guard?
So, I mean, on that, you talked about putting like blue tack. So, for example, on that, you could grab some wings from a different kit, blue tack them on, and be like, is this something that I actually like and want to like further examine if it's worth it before fully committing?
For sure. And I think a lot of the mini ranges that come out now are pretty divisive. I think we've seen a couple in recent times anyway that people have taken to internet with their torches and pitchforks. But yeah, no, it's all about what you think might be not necessarily wrong with it, but what you'd like to change. And I think in your example there, like just finding a different pair of wings is like the easiest format. And blue tack is such like a low amount of risk without totally ruining everything you've just bought.
I would add on another thing to not fear if you're new to it and you're trying to do simple stuff like this. It's not hard if you make a clean cut to just redo some plastic cement and put the head back on. If you're not carving the face up trying to snip a head out of like a librarian helmet, then for most of the head swaps, you can just do a clean cut at the neck if you already glued it on, pop the head off. If you hate the new head, just slap it back on. It'll seal right back up just like it was, no harm done. It's a really good, safe way to get into kit bashing as your first ones, and then you'll feel confident going into some crazier stuff.
And if you do end up looking like some Silence of the Lambs extra, I'm sure you'll give it to a Chaos Marine player and they'll use it happily anyway, so you're all good.
You can't undersell the value of a head swap as well. It changes the whole atmosphere of a miniature. Like I did it to my Dark Angels. I made the Blade Guard that I did for them. I gave them the cowled heads from the old Deathwing Knight kits, and I was like,
yes,
these guys now look infinitely cooler, and it's actually easier to paint than the Blade Guard heads because they cover up so much of the actual face. You're like, yes, just green and some Gilliman flesh, done.
I do think that's actually probably how most people start kit bashing, is the mandatory unhelmeted character wanting to give them a helmet. People who are going to say the first thing they fear is having to paint any skin on their army, and they're like, I'm just going to put a helmet on him and not have to worry about it. That's usually what opens the door for you to doing things off the books and then realizing how much more you could do.
Yeah, it's all about preference at the end of the day, and it's your army, so putting your own spin on it personality wise, it could just be you hate painting skin or you're rubbish at doing, I don't know, something that everybody else seems to be all right at. That's absolutely fine, but just knowing that it's your stuff and you can change it, that's literally just the tip of the iceberg.
My kit bashing repertoire purely stops at head swaps, to be honest. I don't have the time or inclination to do what Kieran does, which is go, yes, Warhammer is Lego. I will stick all these things together and just see what happens. I'm too busy editing videos and he's making thumbnails, so I don't have the time to actually invest.
To be fair to you, some of the things that I've seen you do on previous episodes of yours is stuff like doing whole weapon swaps and arm swaps and stuff and shoulder pads, things beyond head swaps. And as the thing that I would say is like step 2 of figuring stuff out is like wait, if it was that easy to replace the head, I could just snip above the guy's grip on his sword and suddenly the sword could be anything. I've just got a handle.
It's like anything in life as well. I think if you look at it and go, I've got this amazing idea, but I can't run before I can fly, you can go, okay, start with a few head swaps, get comfortable cutting these expensive miniatures to pieces and going, yes, I can make something better, getting over that hump, and then going, like you said, okay, I'll change these arms, and then before you know it, you do what Kieran does, which is go, yes, I make sprue.
That's definitely going to be one of the more difficult things. And honestly, that's for, even just building and painting. All this hobby stuff is like the first step of, I want to do the thing, but I don't know how to do it. Well, start small. If it doesn't work out, it's fixable because it's, not a massive, I'm going to do a complete pose swap. It's change the head and then, I got a bit of experience, could change the swords and, that kind of stuff. And eventually you get familiar and it's more acceptable to actually go for it.
Through all of it is trial and error. And that goes with like painting as well. And everybody's pretty used to that. Even like playing the game, it's just trial and error. And I think if you're new to, mashing up Warhammer kits and minis and stuff, like starting small when it is risk-free is such a perfect entry point. And the braver you get, I suppose the risk certainly opens up about you totally ruining feeling what you've got. But I'm sure we'll discuss throughout like the rest of the show. Like there's certainly ways of cutting corners and also hiding your mistakes, and it's just being like working smarter, not harder.
I mean, I would say do as I say, not as I do, because Kieran, do you remember my first ever Kitbash?
I do.
Khârn, the poop man.
I can't wait to talk about Khârn.
I am honestly really happy that you guys actually made that episode and it wasn't one of those
I'm
where
not.
like you didn't like it so you just fucking didn't release it, because like it honestly gives me some like motivation of like, okay, even if it doesn't go perfectly, it'll be okay.
Yeah, and you've got to make those mistakes and find out on your own. And I think in relation to the Khârn, I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit later anyway, but in respect to Khârn, I think the one thing I could like encourage to anybody that's building something, and if it looks a bit like dodge with like super glue burns or with green stuff kicking about or whatever, just prime it and see what it looks like in a single color. And if that's not quite right, paint it. And if you're still not happy at the end result, then make an assessment, because I think there's 3 stages to kit bashing for sure. Like you've got the ugly build stage where it's covered in, you know, burns and green stuff and it looks proper minging, and then you prime it and it's all one color and it starts to look a little bit more cohesive. And then when you start putting color on it, it actually starts to look like how you imagined. And I think with anything, like you'll see that progressive journey as the mini gets a little bit better by each point. But yeah, no, finish it, and that's the most important thing.
No, that's bullshit. You're just talking about Stockholm Syndrome there. Yes, if I look at this bad thing enough, I'll love it.
You can't commit, my guy, and that's your problem.
I do think that there is something to that of like, as you're using like green stuff or milliput or whatever, and you've added that like weird coloring and texture to this otherwise uniform plastic model, it looks like shit. Just because it has that like visceral, this isn't right. So yeah, I guess it makes a lot of sense to be like, okay, hold off on freaking out for just a moment and prime it. Then it's at least all a uniform color and you won't notice like, oh, it's clearly wrong kind of thing.
Yes, that's something that on my Drukhari I noticed, because Eric, you saw the we've got pictures for YouTube at least of, I made custom Chronoses that I made out of the greatest kit ever known to mankind, the Chronos Talus box, and a bunch of random bits I had from other kit bashes. I had grabbed the AOS Vargeists kit, the one where they're like the running Batmen. It was them, the plague drones from Demons, and then all of those bits slapped together, and the unprimed version looks like a hot mess. You see every bit of green stuff that's jammed in there. You see the piles of super glue that are covering gaps and like trying to keep it all together. But then we've got, after I primed it, it looks like it was perfectly sculpted that way on purpose. Well, mostly perfectly sculpted that way, other than I'm still not very good, but if you look at it from 5 feet away, it looks fine.
Yeah, so there is a certain amount of the as you're going, trust the process, and it like,
yeah,
it's tough, especially when you're new to it. I'm sure, like, as I've done some of the small tweaks here and there, it's been like, oh man, this is fucked.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of that, and I think it's just being like honest with yourself. Like sometimes like just walking away and coming back, and if you're still like this looks like hot butt, then ultimately change it. But yeah, I think still when you're in that build stage, just give yourself a break. Like not everything works first time, and Christ, I've been kitbashing now for like 3 years out of the 4 that I've been doing the hobby, and like there's still things now where I'll build something, I'm like, no, that looks absolutely terrible, or I'll send a picture to Kieran and he'll be like, yeah, that looks terrible, and I'll just change it again. And that, you know, feedback certainly helps. If you can't give it to yourself, then certainly ask somebody else.
So we've talked about the fear of how bad it can look, but we've only been talking about like the little things like head swaps and swapping out a weapon or something. Do we want to talk about actually like sourcing bits to do your first real kit bash where you're combining kits and bashing kits together? Like something pretty big as a project where you might waste $40 or more?
Yeah, I think it all comes from like hoarding stuff, and that seems like terrible advice, but it's amazing how much inspiration like 1 or 2 bits might give you to create something new. So as an example, like I play Chaos Space Marines, especially like with the Chaos Space Wolves, like it's not just picking something from the Chaos Space Marine range, it's also picking something from Space Wolves, or there might be something in any of the other ranges that are adjacent to that as well. So just hoarding as many bits as you can, that's the most important thing. There are some things that you'll absolutely never need, but the option option is there, and I think that's quite handy.
The extra bits, like, so after you've built the model or team of whatever the box was that you bought, there's those like extra pieces of options that you chose not to put on. Just keep it and put it in like a bin.
Yeah, just anything. Like, so for example, I've got like a little organizing station with little drawers and stuff, and I've got way too much now.
Yeah, we've got that too.
It's crazy.
It started as one. Our whole play group keeps ours all together to keep our bits for later use. And it's basically just like a community pool that is 80% me and one of our friends who pulls from, because the rest of them don't really kitbash. But it's nice to have access to in your friend group. But like, we have what started as a little organizer of like a 4x4 little boxes and is now like 5 of those as we've just grown our armies.
It's a whole shelf.
Just the dream. Yeah, that's outstanding. I think when you've got like treasure troves like that of, I don't know, because I get super inspired when I see random bits and bobs, and it could be like, I don't know, you're pulling out random bits for like one project and then you find something else, and then, I don't know, like an idea can materialize from anything.
It definitely is something where I feel like chaos and the less orderly Xenos lead to that spark of inspiration where you go, oh man, this weird demon weapon that's left over, I suddenly want to glue it on something. I gotta find something where this will fit in. This has to be somewhere.
Just give it to someone.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely certain kits that are better for extra bits than other kits.
We've talked about a few on the show many times. So as I already mentioned on this episode, there's the Talos Chronos bit in Drukhari, which is basically just a nightmare freak show circus display of all sorts of disgusting nodes filled with liquid and razor blades on fleshy arms and whips coming off of like human limbs. Fantastic bits that are left over even if you build one of the whole Chronos or Talos. There's in Thousand Suns, we have the Exalted Sorcerer box that builds 3 sorcerers and has enough bits to fix up like 6 other models into sorcerers. All sorts of fun in there.
I honestly think that's one of my all-time favorite kits from GW, actually. Just the mass variety of stuff that you can make from that box. And I think you're absolutely right. As far as like Thousand Suns players are concerned, you just use those bits wherever you want in that army and it just works.
Every army, in my opinion, should have like 2 characters that come in a box like the Exalted Sorcerer box that lets you kit out your army. It's something that I would love to see GW make more of, where it's like not every character has to be 500 options, but just have like 1 or 2 per army, so that now I can have 40 different head swaps that are in this box and any type of crazy shoulder mounted missile that doesn't really mean anything but it looks cool as hell. Stuff like that would be awesome to have across all the armies. It's kind of sad that those don't really exist, but there are like famous kits to me that just stand out as like that's where people source bits from whenever you see crazy kit bashes. Or the reverse, where it's a famous body, Abaddon being the one I always think of everyone has kit bashed an Abaddon.
If I could have a Space Marine captain box that had 3 of them in, stick a fork in me, I'm done.
If it was like the Exalted Sorcerers where you had like enough bits to like do 20 variations on those 3 captains, that would be crazy to give people a bunch of options to make like a more White Scars one where it's got like more Phobos-y shoulder pads to it or something to be lighter. Or like if you wanted to go Iron Handsy, you've got a bunch of bionics all over the place that you could slap bionic limbs on 5 guys.
Yeah, I think the one that does spring to mind actually for the Space Marines that kind of does exist is the Company of Heroes box.
Yeah.
That is full of bits. I mean, it does fuck all in the game at the moment, but that's a different subject.
That doesn't matter for kit bashing. That's the beauty of it.
And I think that is another point of like, when it comes to kit bashing, you don't have to stick to Warhammer 40k for your 40k model end result. Like, you can go to AOS and grab some stuff, or you can grab some stuff from whatever it is. Honestly, GW stuff is going to be easier to put on GW, but you know, you can get other things as well, and it's all being put onto whatever your 40k model result ends up being, but it doesn't have to all be from 40k.
What's quite nice about the GW ranges as well is that they're still quite cohesive. So you'll have Chaos for 40k and you'll have Chaos for AOS, and you'll have those sort of like Imperium armies and Order armies are fairly similar as well, and there's enough similarities within the ranges that you can certainly lend bits and bobs from. Yeah, I think Chaos is definitely the easiest one.
That's always, to me, like the Kitbasher's dream is either Chaos or the Disorderly Xenos, like Orcs, Drukhari, anything where you can have a horrible monstrosity that's like, yep, that belongs in that army.
Yeah, for sure. Orcs was actually my first Kitbashed army. I think when I first got back into the hobby and wanted to play 40k on like a bigger scale, I really liked the idea of Orcs. I think it was Snakebites that I lent into, just literally when they'd released the Beast Snagger stuff.
God, I love that.
Yeah, I used bits from the Stonehorn kit in AOS, like that giant ogre beast thing. Like, so I stuck an orc on the top of that. And yeah, you can just go wild, especially with orcs, because it's just like the concept of stealing everything, and like Snakebites being like loads of, I don't know, animal wranglers or whatever. Like it's just utterly batshit. So you can get away with anything with orcs, because if it looks rubbish, it looks orky.
It was on purpose.
I'm not a massive orc fan, but if someone could give me a Baneblade that had been made to look like it was from the orcs, I'd be well in.
I won't do the easy joke for Eric.
Thanks. Yeah, and I mean, we've got other, GW games, so your Necromunda, that you can grab a decent amount of stuff from.
And I think that gets into my level up moment for kit bashing, getting beyond your basic head swaps or weapon swaps. Is the easiest way to go from there is, instead of possibly ruining 2 kits that you want to make use of, if you've got an idea where it is your official model that you were planning to add to your army anyway, and then you have the idea of like, but what if I could make something cooler by adding on bits from this other box, whatever it is, like Necromunda for Eric's example. It's a lot safer feeling of like, I won't screw with what comes in my original box. I'll cut up the bonus box, and at worst I'm out $40-$60, whatever it ends up being. And if I do it well, then I end up with a way cooler version of what I wanted.
Yeah, the value certainly goes up because you're spending more on that sort of premium, like gourmet bits, which is obviously, it's like a kit basher's dream. When you buy, I mean, I'm guilty of doing this all the time, and it's buying a box just for stuff, like not minis or anything cohesive, like I want to play in a game or whatever. It's just buying it so I can tear it to shreds. And that makes it super exciting because it's almost like the gloves are off. You've already committed to the purchase and you're just like, no, this is fine. I'm just gonna kind of cut it up and see what happens. To be fair, it's like in a similar vein to like the previous points about just like sourcing bits. It's again, hoard everything you can. And it's again having access to that, because you might buy kits that you intend to kit bash and you just never do. So for example, like there's been a joke on our show that I bought 2 of the Space Wolf dreadnoughts just for bits.
Oh, you stole my joke. I was ready.
Oh no! I'm sorry, not sorry. Yeah, and it's just utterly ridiculous that I would even fathom that idea. Doing it once is dumb, but doing it twice is like utter brain rot. So I don't know, getting to that point and realizing, you know what, maybe I should build it eventually. I don't know if I'd done that when I bought the kit like 2 years ago or whatever. My idea then was to do, I don't know, maybe like a Hellbrute conversion. Whereas now, getting to the point 2 years later, where I'm like, no, I am actually going to do it. In my bits box, I had like random limbs from a Mauler Fiend. And I was like, that looks horrendous. I'm going to do that.
Another classic bits kit is the Mauler Fiend / Forge Fiend. There are so many sick chaos bits in there.
Yeah, anything like orientated like around that sort of like pallid, stretched, demonic skin, I just think really works. And when, if you were to use things like, I don't know, green stuff, milliput over the top, it sort of gives that vibe anyway. And it makes it a bit more cohesive, which is great.
I think you shouldn't be telling people to hoard things when you bought 2 Space Wolf Venerable Dreadnoughts for the axe.
Borrelio put the image that Brad has of his Necromunda collection.
Oh my god.
The Gene Stealer Cults project that still has not been started. It's kind of what I'm getting out of this episode personally is to help kickstart me on my next, because I just finished my Demons, which we'll do an episode on someday. So now I need my next big project, and I'm currently debating between finishing the Alpha Legion stuff and going wild doing a building project with a bunch of the Gene Stealer stuff that's going to be my big art project army.
When I saw that picture for the first time of all those boxes, I got so excited for you. It was like secondhand joy. I was like, what? That is going to be the best time.
You're just describing our whole relationship. How many times have I sent you like boxes of Warhammer and you've been like, yes, you've spent stupid amounts of money. So much enablement.
But I think for the people who are naysayers because they're worried about the pricing and worried about the idea of buying things just to use them for a kit bash later, an excuse for you to get into kit bashing so that you might be more okay with it. Think of things like in my Drukhari army, we've got a perfect excuse unit. An excuse unit is something where it's made in fine cast. Like in Drukhari, we have the Grotesque, which is like A, not in print currently, and B, when it's in print, it's like $45 for one, and they're running units of 3 and up to 9 in 9th edition. You've got a unit like that where it would be fiscally irresponsible to buy GW's actual model. But if you already own some Talos and Chronos, you already have a bunch of bits from that box. So now we're just paying to find bodies elsewhere to slap these on and make our own Grotesques. And this is how I made my Vargeist Grotesques, where I took a bunch of the Vargeist bodies, didn't put any of their limbs or heads on, so instead I slapped on a bunch of the bits from my Talos and Chronos box, and you end up with a more cohesive look because you've got clear Drukhari bits all over the place, and the core body is just an ugly mutated thing anyway, which is exactly what Drukhari is, at least in Covens. So you've got that as a way to open the door. Now you've only spent the money that you were going to spend on this anyway, and it's cheaper if anything, because you're not buying GW's overpriced version of it. Instead, you've made your own for cheap.
And it's yours, which is the most important thing.
Exactly. It gets you through the door to realize like, ooh, I really like this.
Would you like a whistle-stop tour of the kits that Kieran has bought for stupid bits? So I'm talking heads.
Sure, let's spend 3 minutes to spend some moments on shame so that those who have also done this feel more at home. What's that one Space Wolf character?
I was going to mention that one. So Kieran, what did you buy Ulrich the Slayer for?
His head.
What did you do with the body?
It's in a box because I hoard everything.
But later on, when he makes a different Space Marine army, he's got a spare captain body laying around.
You know the game. See, this is it. You're speaking my language.
I mean, you could do stupid things like you could buy Bellicor to use the Primaris Lieutenant as scenery.
Oh, nice.
In my defense, I had already painted Bellicor, but I did use the guy from the Bellicor base, and I strapped him to a Venom Crawler because, you know, cool.
That one's actually sick, and I debated doing that for our new CSM army because I would never glue anything to Bellicor's base from the Space Marine, get him off of there. So we have a spare one, and I saw your Venom Crawler one. I'm like, that's an amazing idea to get some chains and like chain him to the Venom Crawler. Oh, it's sick.
Because there's nothing more chaosy than that, isn't it? Just like lots of tributes and just like really like macabre looking shit. Just strap it all over the demon engines.
You're such a fucking edgelord, I swear.
Is it
You're
cool?
It's so good. It's so good. It's so chaosy.
Yeah, just make it look disgraceful.
Who hurt you?
Imperium players, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely right. People that are like Space Marines are the best models in 40k. You're hurting me.
And I'll die on that hill.
Yeah, when the Blood Angels release happens and I change it for the better, you'll all be happy.
No, we'll split up. You'll have to learn to edit a video yourself.
There will be 2 Kieran shows.
Oh no, it'll be the Kieran Show and the Jason Show.
But we've also mentioned green stuff a few times. And Milliput, I think, even got mentioned once, even though it's the devil's green stuff. Do we want to get into the glue in a kit bash?
Realistically, the glue in the Kitbash is still glue, but green stuff is just going to be the nice bits in between.
The metaphorical glue.
All right, so like, what the fuck is green stuff?
That's stuff that comes out of orcs.
Nice.
All right, then.
It's what happens when a blue stuff and a yellow stuff love each other very much.
What's even funnier is you can make different shades of it. So if the yellow one loves the blue one a bit more, they get a lighter shade of green as well.
Yeah.
Color theory.
So green stuff is essentially a putty epoxy where you mix the two halves together and you have a temporary working time, which is quite long with green stuff. You don't have to worry. It lasts for like hours soft. You'll have a temporary working time where it's sculptable, just like it's made out of clay. It's quite sticky and you want to cover your hands in water when you're working with it.
Or you can use Vaseline. That's a good one.
Yes, Vaseline's another one I've heard too. And you've got working time where it's like a clay. You leave it alone overnight. The next day, it's hard as rock. It's fantastic for sculpting. It is sculpted easily with just like X-Acto knives and things that we have laying around just as our normal hobby supplies. You can also get crazy with it and get like clay sculpting tools like at a art supply place for like $8. And as long as you dip them in water so they don't stick to the stuff, you can get really nice smooth coverage with it so that it'll blend right onto the plastic, and then after you prime it, you won't even know that it was custom. And even if you do it bad, it's not the worst, especially if it's acting as skin or something where there's already going to be imperfection and folds and all that. You can see it on, we've shown off before my Demon Prince model. I used green stuff heavily to hide the fact that the head is not a Demon Prince head. I've got screamer parts coming off of the hump on his back. The wings are made out of a terrible fine cast equivalent from a Reaper's mini, but that's all hidden under the paint job, so you don't realize that like his entire back and neck is all green stuff sculpted by my fingers, because this is one of my first things I ever did. And you'll see it all over a lot of the stuff that we'll probably be showing off for the unpainted models in this episode on YouTube, where anytime you see green on the model, that's green stuff. Milliput is the same thing, more or less. It gets a bad name because it can be a pain in the ass to work with, but it's a lot cheaper than green stuff is.
It's a bit more chalky. You mentioned clay earlier. Like, I'd probably compare a Milliput more to clay than I would with green stuff.
Yeah, it's got bigger texture to it, I guess.
Yeah, so it was something actually I learned last year. If you mix the two, you create this incredible hybrid. And similarly with green stuff, you either like a bit more of the blue than the yellow, you get like a slightly different consistency. It works exactly the same when you combine the two of green stuff and Milliput. So now you create something that's less rubbery, so something you get from the green stuff, and less chalky, which you'd get from the Milliput. Again, it takes a little bit longer to cure, so you want to leave it like a little bit overnight or something, but it's so much more pliable and you can actually sculpt it in a much easier fashion as well. So for anybody that's trying green stuff for the first time, I'd recommend it because it's a lot easier to remove from the model just in case you don't like it. But when you combine the two of them, you get like a whole different beast altogether, which is nice.
The one thing I would say for Milliput, so I quite like the using texture rollers. So they're got like bumps and stuff in them. So the one I use on my Fist of the First Templar is like a cobbled stone. So in the ruins, it's like they're stood on like pavement with the slabs. I find the Milliput takes a roller far easier than green stuff. I've done it to green stuff before, and the green, no matter how long you leave the green stuff to get a cure on the base first, there's no amount of Vaseline that will then let that lift up. Stop that lifting up, rather. So yeah, I like to use Milliput in the sense of I'll cover the roller in water or Vaseline if I'm feeling flash, roll it over the Milliput, and it'll give a nice texture.
Another thing you can use if you want a texture like basing material or whatever is DAS, I think it's called.
Oh, DAS clay.
Yes, we learned it from a Marco Frazzoni video, and it's what our buddy's bases are made of for all of his Space Wolves that are on these like runic bases. And it's exactly what you said. He took that DAS clay stuff, followed the Marco Frazzoni instructions on how to use it, and just used a roller to make some nice runic bases and painted them.
Yeah, DAS clay it's not something I've used quite a bit, but I do see a lot of people rave about it. I know Midwinter Minis nearly put them out of business because he covered his giant Great Unclean one in it. That was his whole sculpting material.
Yeah, so I mean, the green stuff, Milliput, DAS putty, whatever, any of those things, basically useful not only in transitioning a swap of, a head to a head or a sword to whatever, but you can also do like some of your own freehanding modeling on it a bit, right?
Yeah, for sure. In a similar vein to the kitbashing, if you wanted to start small, if you wanted to experiment with green stuff or Milliput sculpting to begin with, you can do things like, I don't know, like fur pelt. So it could be something either strapped to like the waist of a space marine or an orc or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Creating a pelt is super, super simple. It's just like finding like this tiny little blob of product that you have, pressing it up against it, and then you could even do it with like the back of a hobby knife and just sort of like drag down from the bottom all the way, work your way up again, and create like a fur pelt texture. There's some amazing tutorials and stuff online. I was lucky enough actually to visit a workshop last year with Baz Watkins, who is Fabious, I think that's what he is on Instagram. Incredibly talented sculptor. He was the person actually that introduced me to the green stuff Milliput exchange, and since then I really haven't looked back. But yeah, as far as starting things, it's like I have to encourage do something messy before you do something clean, because the risk of it being maybe a bit rough around the edges, like it's not too much of an issue. Pelts, capes, really go wild.
And that's a perfect segue, because one of the things we talked about is covering up your mistakes when you make something you don't really like on your kitbash. Capes and pelts, and in the case of flayed ones, human skin. Something to hang off your model. Our buddy Space Wolves, he did the exact pelt method you're talking about, where he slapped some green stuff on a table or something and made it all pelty by pushing an X-Acto knife up back and forth on it, and then draped it over his models. But my flayed ones, I custom made them out of a bunch of garbage Necron warriors that were part of an eBay auction I've had for years laying around in my brother's basement. So we took a bunch of would-be useless models, slapped them to bases, and then just pulled out thin green stuff and draped it over them, pulled on it with an X-Acto knife so that it would be nice and flayed at the edges, and then curved it a bit so that when it would dry, it would have a nice flow to it. And it's really easy to make capes and stuff. And the best part is it can cover the worst parts of a model.
Never underestimate the value of wrapping things in chains as well. So that's something I've made heavy use of because my green stuff ability is non-existent. When I do it, it seems to go really furry, but when Kieran does it, it looks like butter. But when I do it to get rid of that awful texture, I'll get chains and wrap it around the green stuff. You kind of can't see that's green stuff anymore. And then when you prime it, you can't see it's underneath. And purity seals as well. Purity seals to cover up everything.
I was just going to say, it's not just chains, it's also whatever trinket, tchotchke your army has, be it purity seals, chains, whatever. Basically, every army has something that's like their little bit that doesn't really do anything but looks kind of neat and can hide other shit.
And what's amazing, I obviously brought up the point of hoarding everything. If you've got something like, I don't know, Chaos or Orcs or something that's a bit more, maybe like Tribal, a bit chaotic, that would steal other people's trinkets, it gives your models even more personality. But it's almost like they've stolen it off the bodies of other minis, which is awesome.
Doesn't work for Space Marines though, that's why I don't do that.
I think it's cool. It would make Space Marines infinitely cooler.
It could if you did my one idea I had for Space Marines forever ago of making a Monster Hunter Space Marine army, where you just use a bunch of Tyranid bits and Lizardman bits and all that stuff to act as like various Xenos they've killed and collected as like shield plates and stuff. It'd be sick, but Space Marines have to be clean and professional and boring.
I thought we were onto something really cool with the Reaver captain that came in Leviathan. He had like...
Yeah, with the Tyranid bits.
I was like, oh, we're going to get Tyrannic War veterans. They're going to come back. And then GW were like, no, we hate fun. You can just have this one guy that's box locked.
I'm okay with it to remind you that you could kitbash this into a whole army theme. We don't have to have a dedicated single unit that is always Tyranid themed, so much as we need the reminder that you could make this your guys' shtick. And then you've got your kit bashing potential from there. So one thing we haven't discussed is actually doing a reductive thing and scraping stuff off of your model.
Oh, you mean self-harm?
Yeah, I think all of us have markings on us from knife play gone wrong while hobbying.
War scars.
Do you want some pictures of my fingers wrapped in plasters for YouTube?
Nobody wants that.
No, we definitely don't want that or we'll get in trouble.
Do you remember when we did the boarding actions challenge, Kieran? And
I've been suppressing it.
We built, paint, and played it in 24 hours, but we did the building together. Do you remember how much blood I put onto these
Every
walls?
time I turned around, there was just more blood. I was like, what the fuck are you doing?
I was like, I'm bleeding for YouTube. If this doesn't get views, I'm out.
And it didn't. Nobody fucking watched it. You bled for nothing.
I literally did. I still have the lines on my fingers.
Fucking the worst nightmare of world eaters. You bled for nothing.
So enough of how we can do it wrong and trading our scar stories. How can we do it right? How do you go about actually taking off an Aquila or taking off if you don't want a bunch of purity seals on your model or whatever it may be?
I feel like the first question is like, how do you decide you want to take something off, right? Like, it's so much easier to be like, I want to put big gun on thing, not take big gun off thing.
You really do play orcs, don't you? I can hear it.
So, like, I mean, it is one of those, like, taking something away from a sculpt, a detail away, is how do you go about making that decision? You just like, oh, I'm a brilliant genius and I know what's best.
I think a lot of the times it comes up organically while building your kitbash and realizing something's in the way.
Yeah, for sure. I think, it stems from inspiration. In regards to, obviously we brought up Space Marines a lot, and I think a lot of the people that will be kitbashing will probably end up playing Space Marines anyway.
One of us.
One of the models that actually inspired me to start removing things like Aquillas and stuff was the Emperor's Champion model for the Templars. Most of the Space Marine characters have got Aquillas and stuff on their chest plates. And this guy, who I deemed as probably one of the cooler looking characters, didn't. And when you see other people's paint jobs with things like transfers, or you can fill the space in a cleverer way, let's say, with less work. And I think transfers are a whole new different beast anyway, but they've already done the work for you. The manufacturers of the transfers have already made all that detail, which is ace. So I think when you are looking to remove an Aquila, let's say in this example, from a different Space Marine or even a Chaos Marine in a different sense, like there's a few options. Like you can go with like either like the back of a hobby knife, you can look at even scraping it off with a hobby knife blade, but I cannot stress this enough. Don't do another Kieran and don't cut your fingers off. Just take it slowly, be sensible. You could even do it with sandpaper as well. There's some like really great like grit sandpaper that you could do, or altogether just totally ignore the issue and just cover it with green stuff.
I mean, I've actually lost a fingerprint to a hobby knife, a whole fingerprint. It's never grown back. I was trying to cut a squig hog boy off a base because it had been glued on the wrong base, and I was trying to pull the knife under the squig hog's foot, and it was not coming through. And then eventually I just put all of my might into it, had my finger at the front of it, and I genuinely, it's the most ill I've ever felt from a cut on my body. I was like, I genuinely had a flap of skin.
I think I might be dying.
I did the stupid thing. I went to the sink and I washed it, and I nearly fainted. Oh. Because I was like, oh no, that's raw nerve. Don't put water on that.
This entire thing sounds exactly like something Brad would do. I'm gonna take this knife and try and ply this off, and it's not working, so I'm gonna put my whole fucking might behind it and make it work.
Cut away from yourself. What's wrong with you people?
We definitely have our fair share of scar stories from our play group. Most of them are me.
Yeah.
On my right hand, there's a sweet crescent moon on my middle finger. That one came from cutting fine cast on one of the models. There's another slash across my index finger on my right hand from cutting the wings on my demon prince that we were talking about earlier. There's a lot of times, especially with fine cast, where like you're trying to cut through and it's not cutting and it's not cutting, and you just keep putting more and more force behind this rubbery mess of a material. And then the second you hit that point where it finally starts to cut, all of the force turns into kinetic energy, and you whiz through it, you cut through your finger, you cut through the mountain in the background like an anime.
Yeah. I think the important takeaway on that is take it slow.
Oh my goodness.
Don't force.
Just to get slightly back on topic rather than us sadomasochists cutting all of our limbs off, you can actually decide what you're going to cut off by looking at the sprues. So when you get the kits and you're like, I'm going to kit bash this, when you take some of them out of the box, you'll look and go, yeah, this is in the way. So I've got a plan to do a Sigismund kit bash for my Fist of the First Templar, and I want to use Helbrecht, but Helbrecht has the really cool giant flowing cape. But when you look at the bits on the sprue, the way that they go together is the cape is two parts but also joins to his right arm. So then I'm like, okay, I want to change his right arm because I don't want to give him the lantern. I'm like, well, if I'm going to remove that arm, I then have to remove the cloak as well. And I think just by looking at the way the sprues go together and the instructions, I think it can be kind of like an instruction book on what you need to remove, because you go, well, I want to change that, but this connects to that, so I'm going to need to remove that as well.
I would advise when you do that, wear chainmail gloves. I think you of all people.
Get the fisherman gloves so that like when they're
that's
playing.
That's the stuff.
I think I'll need like like when you see the cool people on like Instagram, when they win the Slayer sword and they give them that glove so they can hold the sword up.
So they can hold it.
I think I need to win a golden demon just to save my limbs.
The OSHA glove.
I could just buy the glove, but no, I'll set myself the task of winning a Slayer sword.
It's obviously easier.
I think that'll be easier than me not cutting myself. Just like, every time I pick up the bloody hobby knife, I'm like, I am Tanjiro, I am the Demon Slayer.
So, I mean, out of all of this, one thing is bringing up custom printed bits to add to stuff.
Yes. Getting back to a previous example with my flayed ones, the hands, I've seen people like cut up actual sprue pieces and like try to turn them into triangles and glue them onto a Necron hand. That was way too much work, and we own a 3D printer, so we just printed off flayed one hands to add onto my Necron warriors.
You sound like a magpie, which is what I am. I'm like, yes, I could do this thing usefully, or I could buy this really cool shiny thing to do it better.
Oh, I didn't even have to do the work. With our play group, I'm not the 3D printer. I just set my brother at it.
Here's an STL, print it.
Print this.
I think the biggest ever 3D printed bit is the non-flight stands for the Inceptors.
Yes, those are so common.
So there's those really cool ones where they've got the jets coming out the back. Buy those. I'm not massively into 3D printing, but buy those if you've got Inceptors.
I think all of the ones in our play group use that. That's probably like 20-something Inceptors over the 3 Space Marine armies we've got. And they all use the exact same 3D print we bought.
Kieran, did you just hear that they have 3 Space Marine armies in a whole play group? How many Space Marine armies do you have?
I'm on to my 4th.
One of them is contractually obligated by this show. It wasn't even like one by choice.
Kieran, you would have 4 Chaos Space Marine armies if you had the money.
I mean, it's just a matter of time then, right?
I've bought them all on Hellbrutes. They're all on my shelf.
I mean, I've got a Night Lord's army that he's already making comments about, so I think he actually wants to buy that off me.
Honestly, one of my dream projects for Chaos especially would be like Thousand Suns. I think just doing something like really, really hyper specific and then going to town on it is just the dream. I think they've got such an amazing array of bits as it is for an already quite a limited range. So just anything in addition to that, it would just be perfect.
I have to say, looking at it, I didn't realize at first how many little kit bashes I did throughout Thousand Suns, but there's a lot.
It's just too easy as well. And I think because everything's quite modular, especially with rubrics, it's so simple. It's just like arm swaps or body swaps or trinket additions, shoulder pads, capes. It's amazing.
And unfortunately, due to the design of the army, it's also encouraged by GW because it's like the sorcerer on foot doesn't have an official model. It's use one of the exalted sorcerers or use the generic CSM one. So I took the guy with the book from CSM, chopped him to bits, and slapped on a bunch of Thousand Suns bits, mostly from the exalted sorcerer box, to turn him into one. Then you've got the Terminator sorcerer, doesn't have an official model. The one in the codex literally is a picture of GW kitbashing one and telling you, like, by the way, to make this is how we threw these together. And it's like instructions in the codex telling you, like, kitbash this because we didn't make a fucking model.
Well, honestly, the Thousand Suns art is utterly crushing. There's a picture, I can't work out if they're exalted sorcerers. It's the one of like them in like a pyramid shape, the 3 of them, like with their hand gestures. And hardly any of the heads or whatever are in the artwork aren't available. And it drives me nuts.
Oh, that's part of, it's the artist who makes my picture on YouTube that everyone looks at right now. I feel really bad not knowing this artist's name because he's literally the artist we use art of on every one of our episodes. But he made this art and he made all of the other ones in like the 9th edition codex. And I know what you're talking about. They're all beautiful. Thousand Suns have so many good character arts and none of them actually exist.
No, it's crushing. And especially considering the whole overarching theme is about being, I don't know, essentially like ghosts in a shell and totally Egyptian themed. I'm like, you could just go to town. You could go to town on this as a GW creator, but yeah, it's still stuck. I'm praying for, if not a refresh, then please just give us something that isn't goats. Just something, please.
I mean, you just gotta get Tomb Kings.
It's funny you mentioned that, actually. So with the Tomb King stuff, this is going to sound absolutely ridiculous for anybody that's listening, I'm sure, but it's the Bone Dragon kit, and the character character that's atop it has got loads of different weapon options, and all of those, anything like new spec for Tomb Kings that's readily available now and doesn't cost you like your entire mortgage, is just phenomenal for things like Thousand Suns.
That's true. I hadn't actually thought of that. And again, you don't have to go buy the whole kit like Kieran would.
No, that was silly, but don't do that.
Buy the kit and use the arm.
You can check if someone is selling their spare bits online and buy those. Or if someone in your playgroup owns an army or at your local shop, you can be like, hey, do you have the spare bits that you didn't use on that character?
Yeah, don't hesitate to ask. That's the most important thing.
Just going back to your thing on 3D bits, I think we're lucky enough in the UK to live relatively near geographically to Warhammer World. I mean, it's on the same continent as us, so, you know, eating good. When you go to an official GW tournament, they don't like you to have 3D printed bits.
Oh, yeah. We're doing a whole, spoilers for a future episode, a whole discussion topic on the many rumors of what is and is not allowed to be done to your models because of a single shitty store in the UK called Warhammer World and their exclusive rules for the single store in the UK called Warhammer World that lead to people online assuming that you must build the kits exactly the way it needs to be built. You must color your Ultramarines blue, your Iron Hands black, and anything else, they will shoot you in the face at the door if you disobey.
Yeah.
Thank you to this single shitty shop in the UK.
I mean, it's got a fucking Warhammer museum. Like, you know, it's fine.
Fucking Brits and their museums.
Bet they didn't even make anything in that one.
Yeah, exactly. We didn't have to steal it. The Warhammer World thing is slightly blown out of proportion, though. You can't have 3D printed bits. Do whatever you want. My biggest thing with the 3D printed bits thing is that I'm just crying out for like a Dreadnought upgrade sprue. Like, there's so many cool ones for 3D printed stuff, but because we like to go to like Throne of Skulls and stuff at Warhammer World, I'm like, but I can't use them because I won't be able to take my Dreadnoughts to Warhammer World.
Yeah, this is a problem that affects 20 people on Earth.
Everyone else on the planet is like, who are those losers?
There's a simple solution of go to a better store if the store is like that.
Actually, 100 people go to those tournaments, just saying.
Wow. The size of your average Friday night Magic event. We're getting to like pre-release of a new set level.
So back with the Thousand Sun, thoughts on doing larger conversions? And by that, I mean making them big. So like actually changing the scale of your models.
As an example, like what do you mean by that?
You've got the biggest example, Kieran. Your Farsight, you made it bigger.
Oh God, the guy who's on like the second floor and everything. That model's crazy.
It was, I think, obnoxious, but that's by name and by nature.
Yes.
I think in relation to scale, I think for me, there has to be a cohesive theme with your army. I'm now in a position where I quite like doing individual pieces because you're not necessarily limited to, I don't know, the rest of my army is in X location in the galaxy or whatever the hell we're talking about. And you can build upwards or outwards. I know that people are quite hyper competitive and they want everything to be super cohesive. And it's like, now we've got pivot rules or some bullshit as well. So just throw that totally out the window. It's not important.
Oh, you mean like the fuck nugget that built his Wraith Knights kneeling so they were shorter and they're, oh, you can't see them.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, if you're building for advantage anyway, like, you clearly need some new friends, and that's totally fine.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you do like a switch with that, it's like if there's even a remote question, you lose the line of sight. It's just like, yeah, they can see it. It's not even close.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter.
That thing is enormous. Yeah, I think just being super creative. I think so. Obviously, we just mentioned the Farsight model. It's about creating like a scene and deciding what you'd like to do, even if it might not fit necessarily. Just stick with a vision. That's what it's all about. It might look a bit difficult at times. We spoke about the Hellbrute before as well. Tacking it together, making sure that the pieces work. But I do suppose like the hardest step is committing to that. Is a bit riskier, especially when you're scaling up or even scaling down in some instances. There's some like really big model kits that work phenomenally well as they're designed to, but you might want to use some of those bits for a smaller purpose, which is, I'd probably argue, always trickier. But yeah, ultimately, like, it's creating that plan, creating that vision. 9 out of 10 times that vision will evolve with the build. So you won't end up with what you first envisioned, but just enjoy the process. It all stems from there, really.
So I guess before we end, let's just go through some of these models that people have done here and talk about general tips and lessons from them. So like the first one to me is like this Demon Prince that you did, the absolutely sick face. It's crazy to me how little you had to change for that when I saw what you did.
Yeah.
Because I saw the final model first and I was like, holy shit, that's a lot of custom work. And then I realized what you had done when you showed off the like work in progress pictures. I'm like, damn, that's clever.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And the Demon Prince's face is made by, or like wrapped in masking tape, so 1mm masking tape. So there's actually a video editor that works for Warhammer called Laura. She goes by Pegastix on Instagram.
She's way better than you. Like, just saying, the kit bashing, she blows him out of the water.
Yeah, she's such an incredibly talented grimdark kit bash artist. Her paint jobs are second to none as it is, but the build scale is just out of this world. And I sent her a message and I was like, I've seen it on a couple of the bits that you've done. I was like, what is this? And it's literally just 1mm masking tape and just sealed in with super glue. And I was like, surely not. That seems like the most easy thing in the world. And it is that. And you get such an incredible result with such a simple change. And I suppose it's just, I don't know, traditionally in Warhammer we use like masking tape for airbrushing hazard stripes on something or whatever. You wouldn't actually strap it to a model. But yeah, when it's in that finer format, when it is super pliable, especially when it's not super glued down, yeah, you're just putting tape on a mini. But the results are just really different.
That is honestly wild.
Okay, so to go through the one that I know you're chomping at the bit for, Kieran, to do your depressing lessons.
I have some good lessons.
Shall we talk about the 300 ways not to make a light bulb?
I mean, generally you learn the most from your failures, right?
It's true.
I mean, if you could call it that. I mean, once upon a time when I was going to do a World Eater's army, I was like, yeah, I don't like the existing Khârn model. This kit bashing lark that this other idiot that I know that Kieran does, it looks well easy. I'll buy Khârn, I'll buy an 8-bound, cut them all up. So what I genuinely did was I cut the feet into 3 pieces. I was like, yeah, just smash some green stuff in this. I can rework this. Stuck it together, and he genuinely looked like he was taking a shit. I put it together and I FaceTimed Kieran and I was like, what's wrong with this? And you were like, well, it's hot butt. It looks like he's taking the shit.
I think I was kinder than that, but the message is still the same.
Yeah, it was terrible. That was my first depressing kit bash. And truth be told, I haven't actually done a proper kit bash since. It's just been head swaps and arm swaps.
I mean, I would say that those are proper kit bashes.
Yes.
But that's not the one that I've seen as the end result before. So how did you learn your lessons and end up with a better looking Khârn?
I realized that you do actually have to sculpt green stuff. It's not just you put it in and it conforms to the shape of the miniature. So I pulled it apart and went, right, I'm trying to do something too cool here. Let's revisit. So I got another 8-bound. So I went through the 2 8-bound to make 1 Khârn. So I glued the body together, stuck just the head swap on, and I was like, cool, where can we go from here? And I was like, I want to use a few bits from it. So I want to use his axe and I want to use his cool pistol. Let's just stick those to the side and then wrap the shit out of the arm with chains to try and hide it. Because the 8-bound are like swole. They've got the big muscles, and Khârn, hilariously, like the scale, because he's an older miniature, doesn't. So I had to cut the arm in half. But then the scale was wrong, so I was like, well, I'll just wrap it in big chain and then it'll look okay. But yeah, I still didn't really like how I ended up with it. The initial thought I had for that was that he would be in the original position that he's in, where he's like the awful one, but he'd be screaming to the sky, like he had a bit more emotion in his pose. But I didn't end up with that. I actually never painted the Khârn. It's still in the cupboard. I just primed it to try and get, like we said earlier, just get one whole cohesive colour to see if I liked it. But I think by that point I'd mentally checked out, because I was just done.
And it's fair, not every project goes to plan, but I do think the end result ended up looking pretty nice. Definitely a glow up compared to the first attempt.
Yeah, on my heavy intercessors for the Fist of the First Templar, I wanted to give them like a Crusade vibe, to really lean into bridging the Black Templars aesthetic with the Imperial Fists. So I actually used the Forge World Imperial Fists heads, stuck those in the hole. Didn't even need to cut anything away from them. The scale was perfectly fine. I mean, it's not really kit bashing, but I made a heavy use of the Black Templars upgrade pack.
Technically, at the most basic level, it's an extra kit. I would say that it's most likely, if we're getting technical on it, probably most people's first kit bash is utilizing an upgrade sprue. Something that's not in the basic instructions.
Yeah, the upgrade sprue, particularly in the Black Templars one, is really good. I know there's a few that I've cut the swords up. There's like the really weird, long, double-pointed sword that makes absolutely no sense. But you stick it to a Space Marine, it looks kind of cool. And as I mentioned earlier, the Dark Angels I did, where I put the cowled heads on, just to completely change the whole atmosphere. What was really funny is, so it was the old, I think it was the Primaris Champion. It was an event exclusive. You couldn't get it anywhere else. It was one of the first I did. And I was like, I need that miniature. And I bought one on eBay.
How much?
I spent £50 on the Primaris Champion. And then I cut, which was at the time that was okay. I couldn't get it anywhere else. I was like, this will look really cool. Just for reference, it's the one with the sword going across the body. Funny as well is after I bought it, after I cut the head off, that miniature actually went made to order on the Games Workshop website for £27.50.
It was like the next week. It was crazy.
And then just to add even more salt to that wound, they then came out with an alternate sculpt for it in the Company of Heroes box.
Which was infinitely better anyway.
Yeah. But yeah, other than that, I haven't really done a great deal of kit bashing. I mean, I've got a whole Trello board. I mean, I've got great ideas. Like I mentioned earlier, there's the whole Sigismund kit bash. There's a Night Lords kit bash. I think there's a lot of potential for Night Lords characters in the Mephiston kit.
Yeah, vampire-y. Yeah.
My thing for that is I want to get the Dark Apostle kit. I want to take the head off Mephiston. I want to put a Dark Apostle's head on it. I'm going to get some steel wire, drill into the eyes of the Dark Apostle, put some lightning coming out of the eyes, then going into the fists that's held out by Mephiston, and then you've got the giant sword hanging down. And then, you know, his armor looks very much like a vampire. It looks like something out of Buffy. So that'll be really cool. But as with everything, I don't think I'll ever get to that. I mean, the only other big one I have in the tank is a massive Chaos Knight kit bash. So there's the old Chaos War Shrine, which I think is a really, really old AOS kit. I mean, it still comes in a white box. Like it's the dregs. It's really old. I want to get that and I want to stick it to the top of a Chaos Knight. Then get just like some plasticard and stuff and like make a structure that comes around it. So it's like it's riding on the back, and then put the Dark Commune on the top as if they're driving the Chaos Knight. But again, I think that's just my 10-year-old imagination running away with me, and it'll never actually happen.
Well, I mean, that's how it starts, right?
Yeah, you know, shower thoughts where you just stood there thinking about Warhammer and you're like, yeah, these kits could go together.
Kieran, for one last one from you, is there one that you think has some good lessons behind it out of your amazing repertoire we've got sitting here in front of us?
I think let's do two. So we've got one from AOS and one from 40k as well. So we'll start off with AOS because it hasn't got much love in the kit bashing chat so far. It's the Soulblight Gravelord Megagargon I did last year.
Oh, the dead one?
The big dead one. Yeah. So
oh yeah.
It was actually a gift from my wife actually for my birthday last year. So we've got this thing where for each of my birthdays she'll buy me like a Warhammer kit that maybe necessarily I won't buy for myself or isn't from an army that I have or whatever. Something that she'll go into a store and go, that looks cool. I'm sure he'd love to paint that and just pick it up. And I was almost like a bit starstruck when I got the Gargant because I'd never painted a giant before, never even thought about kit bashing one, but I found out that you could run a Gargant as a mercenary for the Soulblight Gravelords, and I was like, well, I think I just have to try this out. And there's loads of gnarly shit going on with it, like a jaw hanging off and like his arm has been strapped up in chains chain, almost like it's been like hooked to it with like loads of giant heads, like on this swinging club thing. Honestly, it was a nightmare from start to finish. I think building it was the most fun, but it was so chaotic. It wasn't cohesive at any point. Did any point I think that I was winning, I'd only be lying. It was just an utter trial by fire, and just I don't know, just going for it. I knew when I first started, my main aim was making it look like a zombie. So I don't know, having like random holes in it, like from like bullet wounds, or taking his arm off and replicating it is what I actually wanted to do. So like having like a giant hook come out of it or something, like sort of like Resident Evil, make it look really gnarly. And then I had the wise idea of the jaw when I was building the head, and in a rush of blood, I just cut the bottom jaw off. I just went, well, it's too late now, I've committed. And the ugly stage lasted probably 98% of the entire model. And it wasn't until the end when I added woohoo glue or oohoo glue or something.
Yoo-hoo glue.
I could have swore that was a uwu.
Oohoo glue?
Woohoo glue?
Awful.
We called it woohoo glue. No, woohoo sauce for quite a while, which is wrong.
Woohoo sauce, which is something terribly different. But yeah, and it just adds to that macabre, very disgusting, corpse-like. The rider on the top was sort of like the icing on the cake. I was quite happy with not having anything, and I went on eBay to see how expensive it was, because I remember over the last couple of years the Cursed City range was quite expensive, but then I managed to pick up the Gorslav, the Gravekeeper or Gravedigger or something. I can't remember what his name is, but yeah, so I managed to pick him up for like £6 or £7 or something on eBay, and I was like, yeah, go on.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it was just loads of fun. Definitely not without its mistakes, but as we've mentioned more than enough.
I mean, you clearly like pissing money because we already have a Gorslav Gravekeeper for free in the garage that you could have used. You didn't need to buy one.
That could be his own mini. That's his own thing. Well, hoarding bits. What can I say? Yeah, so that's obviously AOS. And then with 40k, I recently did Fabious Bile and Kitbash. So luckily I was sent out the Abraxia kit from Warhammer. And honestly, I wanted to do a Chaos Wolf Kitbash to begin with. I wanted to like go with like a bit of a new take on a Lord Discordant. When they first released the mini, it's something that I knew that I wanted to do in the realms of a Lord Discordant anyway. But the longer I was sat on it, I said to Kieran, I was like, look, one of our earliest ever challenges was Fabious Bile. We did like a 1 hour painting challenge on like one of our first ever videos. And Kieran did a Fabious Bile. He hated it and shoved it to the back of a drawer.
You hated it too. It was fucking dreadful.
It was proper bad, but because you can't paint a Chaos character in an hour, it's utterly insane. But yeah, no, I was like, have you still got it in the drawer? And he said, yeah, like I'll strip it and I'll bring it over. And when he asked me, what are you using it for? And I told him, I think, what did you say? You were like, nah, no way, that's not working.
I was far more supportive than that.
No, you weren't. You were like, no way. Yeah, that was cutting up the head of the Abraxas dinosaur thing and replacing it with, I think it's a Lord Discordant's beast. What's it called? A Vex?
Vex Machina is the guy, isn't it?
I don't even know, It's the mean gribbly dinosaur looking thing that looks like, had all sorts of needles poked into him.
Oh, you mean it's the head that looks like Tentacool if Tentacool did meth?
Yeah, that's it. Nice. Real nice.
Yes, that is from the Lord Disco, and that is exactly how you describe it.
So I strapped that on. Replacing Abraxia with Fabious Bile was quite difficult, so I actually had to cut half of his body right the way down.
And you did what you talked about earlier with the green stuff at the line where you cut to go around it.
Exactly right. That was actually one of the trickier bits, actually, because Fabious Bile wears like a skin cape. I wanted to try and keep that theme, so it was a case of mixing milliput and green stuff again, adding to that skin cape, almost like to maintain that cohesion around the two minis, just to make sure that it looked the same. But to cover all of my mistakes on the Lord Discordant head edition, I can what can only be described as made my own kebab. Just added layers of meat and skin to like this next. He's got this horrible meat scarf, which is truly awful. But I remember making it, I was like, God, this looks shit now, but when it's painted, it's going to be rocking. It's going to be so good. But yeah, it's definitely an example of trust the process and believe that the ugly stage is It will be ugly until you paint it, and then it's up to you to come up with a different artistic direction.
All right. I think we've covered the vast majority of the basics, at least, for kit bashing, what it is, why you want to do it, things to look out for, a few tips and tricks along the way. So that probably does it for the topic. As for our two lovely guest hosts, where can we find the two of you if we want more right now to go watch?
You can find us at the Kieran Show, both on YouTube and Instagram, if that's your flavour, but please go to YouTube, not Instagram, because that's the actual content we make.
If you want really good thumbnails, you should go to Instagram as well.
So while I've got free airtime to insert a free ad into someone else's content, we actually have a bunch of challenges on our channel. So most recently, I tried to paint an Imperial Knight in a day. No spoilers for that, but go and watch that and also the draw for it. I don't think I've ever seen myself display that much emotion in the space of 2 minutes.
It's free therapy.
For me, it's still the first combat patrol challenge for me on the more emotion shown in a single moment.
The Tyrannid reveal was...
I can still feel that. You know, like when like when you have like you're sick and you never eat that food again. That's me with Tyrannids. That's the same thing I have. I can still feel how it was to draw Tyrannids and have to paint them again.
It's a failed repression. You got to try harder to really repress those feelings.
But for our seal of approval, I think you should definitely go watch their stuff. Their Scaventide 24-hour challenge. Go watch the Kieran cut, the longest cut of it. It is fantastic if you're the type of person like me who likes watching like long-form challenge videos of like, let's get together and paint something over a weekend.
I mean, you could also, if you wanted to watch us paint terrain for 24 fucking hours, you could go and watch the Boarding Actions terrain painting challenge.
Watch a man cut up his fingers, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. There's blood everywhere. It wasn't good.
I've bled for these videos. Please go and watch them.
Obviously, take a look at the Khârn Kitbash one.
But before you go, please do us a favor and do the YouTube pleasantries. And then when you go watch their stuff later, do the same. But additionally, I have to make sure we also shout out our merch. We've got new merch for celebrating Horde mode. But I think that's enough shilling for the episode. We're out of here. All three of you do a sounds good. And we'll just have Borrelio time it so they all say it at once.
Anybody going to count us in?
You don't have to do it at the same time. We can fix it.
All right. That's interesting.
I'll go first.
Sounds good.
Oh. You already went.
It doesn't just say sounds good, Jesus Christ.
Sounds good.
Just take the one from the intro and layer it in here.
Fuck
No.
me.
Eric, say the goddamn line.
Say the line, Bart. Say the line.
Sounds
good.